Hello and welcome to the latest Safer West Mercia podcast. My name is John Campion and I'm the West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner, and I shall let my guests introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Kate Ginn. I'm the Victim Care Coordinator in West Mercia for RoadPeace.
I'm Lucy Harrison. I'm the Project Outreach Coordinator for RoadPeace in West Mercia, and I coordinate the local group here as well.
Excellent. Well, very warm welcome to you both. And joined during National Road Victim Month. And one of the reasons we are here today is to talk about some of the harm caused on our road, what's being done to support those who might be associated with that harm, and ultimately also how we make our roads better. Here in West Mercia, we still see too many people killed and injured on our roads. We still see around 50 people in the past year, and one life lost is one too many. We know that the harm caused sometimes is normalised in our society. It can be the article in the newspaper that gets flicked over because that's what just happens. And one of the great things I think about National Road Victim Month is that we're highlighting it, we're talking about it, we're reminding our communities of the harm being caused and that it doesn't have to be this way. As Commissioner, I've invested around £300,000 to ensure more communities in West Mercia see programmes around tackling that harm, and indeed work with RoadPeace very proudly about supporting their services to make sure that more people get access to the amazing work that RoadPeace do. So today we're going to be talking about some of that work. We're going to bring in some of those terrible instances to life with some lived experience from those that have been connected, and ultimately we're going to be talking about the future as to what the future might look like. I think it's probably worth by starting to talk about what RoadPeace is. What's its ethos? What does it stand for?
Well, RoadPeace is the national charity for road crash victims. We basically are campaigning for a world where road danger is not tolerated, and where those who sadly do become victims of road crashes receive justice and compassion.
Because that's a central bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the campaigning and the support,
Yes.
and that doesn't make RoadPeace isn't unique as a result, but it's not far off unique, is it? That balance between the two is quite unusual.
Yeah, it's a special organisation, and I think traditionally perhaps victims of road crime aren't always seen as victims, or the way in which they may lose a loved one isn't always seen as a crime, when it very often is. So that's something that we want to change, and we want to see road crash victims treated fairly.
And I like that balance between the two. And when you talk about campaigning, what kind of things would they do? How does that manifest itself? How do they go about doing that?
Well, we like our campaigns to be very much victim-led. Everything we do at RoadPeace is kind of peer support and victim-led, and the victim's voice is at the centre. So things develop naturally. At the moment, we've got a campaign around hit and run collisions, which has come up through our members, and feeling that there's some changes that could be made there. We have the Crash Not Accident campaign, which is long-standing. I know I've spoken to you before about the importance of not saying accident. So they do really generate directly from our members. At the moment, this month, we've got a campaign around the dangers of speeding. So we've had 6 of our members take part in some really powerful videos talking about the devastation that can cause.
So that's a campaigning side, and the other side of the organisation around that support. Mm-hmm. How does that work? How does that bring to life? I'm asking a loaded question because I've seen some of the support work that you guys do, but for those listening and watching, what would that look like? How would that work?
So, I mean, our support services are very much there for when somebody wants to take them up. There's no deadline, there's no time limit. They can be referred in via the police, as they are here in West Mercia, or self-refer, and there's a whole range of options really. The support groups are all led by somebody who's been bereaved in a road crash, so it is peer-led, and that's something that's really important and unique, because people often feel you can't possibly really understand. Even the most compassionate person can't. We have a befriender service, so one-to-one support on the telephone, and obviously in West Mercia we have the amazing support that you've commissioned in Kate.
So I offer one-to-one support to victims and witnesses, and that's over the telephone, but also increasingly video calls as well, to try and make that connection with people, and as well as telling them about the other support services we offer, like the groups and the befrienders, and our resilience building program, which is also funded in West Mercia. I'll support them one-to-one, and I might refer them on to other services. All those two things might carry on alongside each other, so there's no sort of limit on the amount of support people get from RoadPeace.
Because there's a long-standing tradition of police officers and those in policing giving compassion and care to those that they engage with when these collisions happen, but it's not always able to be as intense as some of the work that we're now able to offer, and that's quite a big step change, I think, here in West Mercia, because police officers will often have quite a big caseload to carry, or indeed the different shift patterns and all the other pressures of policing, and the ability here in West Mercia and working with RoadPeace to deliver that, I think, been really, really powerful. And Lucy, you're the reason why when I go on a long journey now and I get annoyed with the overhead signs often on motorways when it says, report of accident or accident on X, Y, and I'm going, shouting quite loudly, that's not an accident type thing. Somebody's behaviours would have contributed to that, and I think that combination between the two, I think, becomes really powerful, because there's the basis of the campaigning being the amazing work, understanding the harm, because it's the lived experience of the organisation. Really, really powerful. 30 years of RoadPeace is that's a lot of skin in the game, isn't it, in terms of lived experiences. The range of services you've touched on some of them here, it's huge, isn't it, in terms of what can be offered. And if there are people out there who think, well, actually that might not work for me, there is much more, isn't there, that RoadPeace do?
Yeah, as I said, some people might want one-to-one support, some people might want a group, they might want both. Some people can also touch in with us in different ways, so perhaps in remembrance. Some people have been, I've had victims referred to me that haven't wanted support but have actually found a way into us through remembrance, and then fundraising, and then becoming part of a group. So people have different journeys into the charity, if you like.
Because we are all very different, aren't we? And I haven't been the victim of somebody in my family or close circle of horrific things that will have happened. And it was a point I think you made earlier in terms of I would call myself compassionate, but I can't have that understanding, can I? And I think that's a very powerful bit, and a bit around the remembrance is another part, I would imagine, of grieving. Is that the element as to why that remembrance is sometimes seen as so important to individuals as to how they process some of that grief?
Yeah, I think for victims, how they want to remember is different for everybody, which is why we also offer sort of roadside memorials if people want that. Some people don't want that at all, so we have a service in National Road Victim Month, which was last weekend, and that was amazing, moving, and brings victims together from all over the country. And we heard victims' voices there, and yeah, for some of our victims, that's a really important part of their journey.
Because sometimes the sceptical people will say, well, what difference will it make? Well, the ability to be able to vocalise, hear the victim, incredibly powerful, and not only to those present, but also to the wider society, and having the forum, organised forum, to be able to do that, I think really quite extraordinary. I touched a little bit around where we are now to where we've maybe been in recent times, and a greater breadth of supported services. RoadPeace done an amazing job for a long time. Hopefully some of my partnership with them will enable some additionality. What do you think the and it's a loaded question, I suppose, but what do you think the biggest benefit has been of the bit of a shift change that we've been able to make? What would be one of the central benefits, do you think?
I mean, I think here in West Mercia, what I think is key is that RoadPeace is now there from day one almost, if people want us, or there's certainly, police are telling families about us very early, whereas something we hear more of in our organisation in other parts of the country is we had to find RoadPeace.
Right. So you had to almost happen across it,
You
as it were.
happen across it. I know with my own experience it was about 18 months before I knew of RoadPeace, and I just think that during those 18 months I could also use that support. So I think that even if people don't necessarily want to take it up immediately, just knowing that something's there can be quite a comfort. There's always a story of a lady who kept a leaflet in her bag for several months, but just knowing that it was there and that eventually she would dial that number, you know, made that difference.
The help if needed, and that's it's a very small act, isn't it, in terms of the awareness very early on.
And it's really difficult to measure that impact.
Yes.
It's really difficult to know the difference we're making sometimes with those people that have got the leaflet in their bag. And
yeah, I think it has made a tremendous difference.
It has.
And we've seen people, you know, they come into our service absolutely at the worst moment in their lives, but they end up going through this journey where they become very empowered, and they are telling their story at remembrance or joining together with others or doing things that they perhaps never would have imagined they'd have the courage to do. And that's really special, actually, to see people enabled to do that through just an awful experience.
People do talk about strength, don't they? And it's often seen in quite a masculine way, isn't it, strength? But you look at the emotional strength that must be in some of these individuals who've been through the journey, and the support given to enable that strength to come out is quite an amazing thing about recovery as well, in terms of using that to help recover. Not recover as in it's not happened, but being able to live a life that maybe doesn't have the volume of hurt that maybe might be there, because the pain will never go away, will it? But how manage and understand that, I think, really important. It'd be, I think, quite pertinent to talk about a case study, if there are some elements to which maybe, and I know it's somebody else's story, it's not our story, but I know that because we've talked to you in advance, that there is an opportunity to maybe talk about a bit of a case study to bring it to life a little bit, helping the listeners understand the impact of the individual cases.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have a mother and daughter who've been supported through our service. Unfortunately, their son/brother had his life taken in a hit-and-run collision. They came in and received one-to-one support, a lot of emotional talking things throughout the court case, and the ups and downs and difficulties that brings, because obviously that's part of a road death people don't always think about, the prolonged criminal justice process that follows. They came down to Parliament with us in January as part of our hit and run campaign, so amazing to see two people, you know, in Parliament talking to MPs, telling them what they need to change, making sure that they have their voices heard. Takes great strength to do that. And the mum just spoke at the remembrance service at the weekend, did a reading of a beautiful poem. Again, tremendous courage to stand there in front of a packed room and do that in memory of her son. She came along to the strategic meeting, so spoke with the inspector about her experience and perhaps the learning that could be taken from it. And so being supported through her grief, but actually giving so much back at the same time without necessarily even realising what she's given back herself. And I think keen to be really involved and probably going to do some really great things with RoadPeace going forward.
So that journey from support through initial incident, that journey through the criminal investigation, as it were, and a criminal process through court as well, and then a coronial process, I would assume, as well at some point.
Yeah, I mean the coronial process will probably just find the criminal justice outcome was.
But again, another something we're not familiar with. As you know, I happen to know, I suppose, because the job I do a little bit about the coronial process, and I know about the court process, but lots of people won't do, will they? And it's a completely alien, on top of the incredible trauma, completely alien process, and that support through actually, what does this mean? You know, this is happening now. What does it really mean? Or this has taken forever. You know, why type thing. That understanding of context and lived experience it is an amazing support service. And then the bit at the end in terms of actually turning that into trying to change, because it can never, that individual can never be brought back, but the trying to stop it happening again is quite a powerful bit. And the support to campaign, as I've said a couple of times, is an interesting and amazing combination.
Yeah.
And trying to get the bits that we need from legislation change, because we do need some changes, but we also need to help society change, don't we, in terms of that lived experience and what it means when we're doing 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. That's not because we're late and I need to get there on time. Actually, that could have the most devastating of impacts, learning the impact of our choices, our behaviours. Really powerful stuff. We touched a little bit around how they get access to services. So talk a little bit about how somebody would access a service all the way through from an incident happening through to something happening a while ago and somebody wanted to get in touch. How would these things happen?
There's no sort of fixed way that they have to access us. Because of the funding in West Mercia, family liaison officers will often refer victims and witnesses to me and I'll make contact. Equally, any victims can make contact with RoadPeace, and they could do that through our website, and if it was a West Mercia case, they'd be referred back to me. There's no time limit. This could be, officers are often referring to me days after crash, but equally victims can come to us at any point, and what happens is that I'll make contact with them and give them a little bit of information about RoadPeace, and then I'll follow that up a few days later to find out if they'd like some one-to-one support from me. So everybody referred receives some information about RoadPeace and what we do, and then I'll follow up to see if they'd like one-to-one support, or maybe they'd like something else, like access to a group. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes people just want to get involved in remembrance, potentially.
And the message out there to those that might be listening is that there is help and there is support.
Absolutely, get in touch. Whether that is one-to-one support they want, or whether they just want to come to a group and speak to others who have that lived experience.
It can be absolutely to the individual. There's no expectation of joining in Parliament or all the way through to other bits. It is literally a case of to the individual and what they might need and what support might be might be suitable for them. And one of my reflections around RoadPeace is quite the amazing adaptability. I've talked a little bit about we're all individuals. Well, we all need different things, don't we? And RoadPeace's adaptability to that is extraordinary to see, because whilst the being stood in Parliament talking to MPs might be it wouldn't be everybody's, would it? And not what they would want, and to be able to have that range is quite an extraordinary thing. You've touched on some of the campaigns and Hit and Run being a recent one. In terms of my work as commissioner, if you were me, what would be the one thing you would do around road safety? What would be the thing that you would say to me? Right, that's the thing that needs to be focused on.
That's such a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've taken a tremendous step in commissioning the support, and
absolutely
the support being for anyone bereaved, injured or witness to a road crash, and whether or not there's a culpable driver or not. Yeah. I think that's very different to other areas, and you've sort of led the way there.
Ironically, I asked the question not to be nice about me, but it's a genuine where next, as it were. I do like you being nice about me, just to be clear.
That allows me to support people that wouldn't receive support anywhere else in the country. People who are witnesses, I don't think are getting supported anywhere else.
What's next? What's the bit that we do after? Because this is it. This has got to be our business as usual now, hasn't it? It's a step forward. What's the bit that we do next? Where's the next area that we see?
I know you're looking at more face-to-face support.
Absolutely, yeah.
The human contact.
Because it's a huge force area that can present challenges, but yeah, I'm moving towards doing some face-to-face sort of surgeries so people can arrange to see me face-to-face in person.
So the next step is how we make more human contact, how we get that capacity in the system to be able to do that. It's I know the advent of electronic access means that we can FaceTime or all the other platforms to be able to see. It's not quite the same as the one-to-one interaction. It's not quite the same as the human contact that we need. And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because that's not a complex system of something or other. That's just literally a slight change in how we deliver doing some things. You've heard me say it before a number of times. I'm really proud to work with RoadPeace. They're an amazing organisation, and they do quite an amazing thing in the most terrible of circumstances. And a bit of a no-brainer in terms of the partnership investment. It wasn't a difficult choice, but to get it done, it's something I'm proud of. I'm proud to work with. And I want to thank you both for your campaigning, your work, and your support out there. Is an amazing thing. And I think the having to bang on about something that's really important in our society is a thankless task, because people don't want to hear about the impact of their behaviours in their vehicles, and we've got to make sure that happen. As Commissioner, I'm really proud to work with you guys, and indeed, really proud of the Commission work that you guys do for me as well. So, really, thank you for joining me today on the latest Safer West Mercia podcast. There's lots of information about RoadPeace out there, isn't there? And they just have to pop RoadPeace into their search engine, and there is some amazing information online. There's information on my website, West Mercia PCC, and some information on West Mercia Police's website as well. It's on all the social media channels, on Facebook and Twitter and the like. So again, lots and lots of information out there. And if anybody is either interested in the work of RoadPeace or interested in how they access some of the services, I think that's a really compelling message of there is help and support out there at whatever scale and level that's right for you. And the suffering alone doesn't have to be. There are other people who have shared experience to which can help and support. And as I say, thank you for joining me today, and thank you to our listeners for this latest Safer West Mercia podcast.